All right. Hi, guys. Welcome to Cherry and Timber Talk. And this has been okay. I think I can hear my echo in the background somewhere. I think the videos.
It's
The
all working
videos.
okay, I think.
It's all working. Okay, don't worry. Go ahead.
All right. Yeah. So I think the tab was open on my end. Sorry, my bad. Hi, guys. Welcome back to Cherry and Timber Talk. Been quite an eventful week with lots of action happening on and off the cricket field. On the cricket field, India winning the second test in Melbourne, which was a dramatic turn of events from what happened in Adelaide.
Yeah.
And today, slightly concerning news with Saurav Ganguly. I hope and we hope that he's fine and he's coming back to good health. And the fun part about this show today is we have Ricardo Powell with us. Ricardo, thank you so much for joining us, the former
Yeah.
West Indian dashing batsman of his era. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, guys.
Wagwan, Ricardo.
Everything's good. Everything's good.
Awesome, guys. So, Ricardo, I mean, it's such a pleasure having you here, and we all have been the '90s kids, growing up in that era, and having watched and followed cricket during that time. We were really amazed by what you had, as a skill. And I know that you do a bit of coaching right now, and you teach power hitting to a few of your kids. I saw a few of your videos, so that's interesting. So, first question, how was it, being in that West Indian team in that era? Your debut, and take us through some of your moments.
Wow. This question has been asked quite a few times over the last 20 years. And I mean, I think in the moment, I mean, you can only appreciate at the time because, I mean, I was probably just about going on 20 years old,
Mm-hmm.
playing with the likes of Brian Lara, Walchi, and also guys like Ambrose, Jimmy Adams, and all these guys, and playing against the likes of
Yep.
India with Sachin Tendulkar, Ganguly, um, Sehwag, Harbhajan Singh, um, you name it. I mean, all the reputable and greats of that era, and to be able to make 100 against a team like that with such a bowling attack at that young age was something that was almost unreal. I mean, I think being fearless back then, not knowing who is who you're playing against, just looking to prove yourself is something that I will always
Yeah.
cherish for the rest of my life. And
Yep.
even today, it shows me that in this life you cannot be afraid of anything. If you just go out there with any with no hookups, no hesitation behind you, and just take everything in front and look ahead, and anything is possible. And that to me was one of my greatest career innings. And I mean, I've played a lot of good innings thereafter, but that is something that I am truly appreciative of, and that has taken me through my entire career to be where I am today. Because without that 100, not many people would have remembered Ricardo Powell. Appreciative of, and that has taken me through.
Correct. Absolutely. I mean, you certainly broke a lot of Indian hearts that day for sure when you played that knock in Singapore. And I think all of us, that time we were really, having that frustration. But now I think when we look back at that innings, it's surely one of the great knocks played in that era for sure. Coming back from the position that you guys were, exceptional. All right, Mahesh, why don't you go first? What's your question for Ricardo?
So you were in the team when I scored 400 runs. How was the mood in the dressing room when you broke this world record for the second time?
Wow. I think as a batsman sitting down watching, it was very entertaining. Um, you wanted to have a piece of the action at that time, but I mean, it was great to watch, knowing that he had set a record before and break a record before, and on course to break in a second one. It was something that was very entertaining to me. The first day after Brian, 100, I think 130 something. he told me that he was going to break the record.
Wow.
Yeah.
He told me he was going to go all the way, and he's one of those players who have the mental capacity to really steadfast in terms of whatever he wants to accomplish. And when he tells you something like that, it's something that you have to believe. But it was amazing. I mean, it was flawless, and I had the opportunity to bat with him during that innings. And I mean, I didn't stick around very long, but I mean, just to be a part of that whole experience is something that you would take with you for the rest of your life.
Awesome. Amazing. Nishad?
Yes, my question is you, looking back, we can say that you were a player ahead of his time, considering your strike rate. You finished with a strike rate of 96 in ODIs, which at that time was quite a lot. At one time, I remember your strike rate was even over 100 just before the 2003 World Cup. And there was obviously you were batting down the order, always attacking, trying to get those runs in the slog overs. Did you possibly feel maybe if you were given a run at the top, maybe on more occasions, you could have possibly contributed a lot more, because a lot of the times, losing all those wickets, you would either walk into a situation where you have to go for it completely, or the team has lost a lot of wickets and you have to stabilize.
Yeah, I mean, it's something back then. I got a few opportunities to do so, and I think my average at the top of the order, especially even sometime opening, was around 56. So it showed that batting at the top of the order, I had more time, and could have done a lot more. But I mean, looking back and where I'm at right now, I mean, sometimes it makes no sense even thinking about it. But I think we all have, I wouldn't say regrets, but have things that we wish we could have done differently. I could have gotten the opportunities to do differently. But yeah, looking back, yeah, I mean, at the top of the order, definitely, I had some better innings.
Just one thing to add, I remember when, as long as you were batting or you were to come, and especially after the Singapore knock, we in India, we were never assured of a win. Always there was a lurking danger that Ricardo Powell is still in the hut, or he's out in the middle, and there's something that's going to happen. And the other story I'll share, in fact, it's just I remember it was 2003 World Cup. We were playing Sri Lanka in a day-night game, and when Sarwan was hit by Dilhara Fernando on the head and he had to walk off, Hooper came out to bat and he was out first ball. And I still remember sticking around. I was a young boy sticking around watching because I knew you were in the hut. And I only switched off the television because I felt, okay, fine, he's gotten out now. And because it was a great delivery by Muthaiya Muralidharan, I don't think many batsmen could have kept it out, because it, I think, spun from 7th or 8th stump and
Yeah.
almost your leg stump off. I don't think anyone could have played that. But till then, I felt till you were out in the middle or there was a chance. And West Indies did come close there, but that's the kind of impact that you had on Indian fans in that generation.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that I really, and maybe at the moment in terms of back in that era, it's not something that I truly appreciated as a young player. And looking back in terms of the entertainment and the joy that I brought to the game and to fans all over the world is something that today I can really soak in and appreciate, because I think a lot of times when you're actually in the moment, you don't realize the impact or the overall motivation that you have on players and fans all over the world when you fail or when you perform, what happens. And I think now that I would say older, I can look back and say, you know what, I could have done this, I could have done that, but in the moment when I did X, Y, and Z, I really changed the life of many fans, people who started engage themselves into watching cricket more, started looking forward to seeing Ricardo Powell coming out and bat to hit some sixes or whatever. If he fails, I'm disappointed. If he makes runs, I'm happy. And that was the mood of sports back then. And I think it's something that a lot of fans now get from people into cricket, where
Correct.
everything is just excitement. They want to see this player back. They want to see that. And sport has become more about entertainment and less about results overall, because you have your favorite player who you want to see. And once that player makes runs, you don't really care if the team win or lose. Maybe not in India's case because Indian fans want to see India win all the time. But I can speak based on West Indies, where you have your favorite Chris Gayle or Andre Russell, and once you see these guys and they make runs, you have gotten your money's worth pretty much. So I think the sports overall has changed somewhat, but there's something from that era where fans hold on to and they will always remember. And I think it will probably be the same with this generation going forward.
I think you nailed it. I think very well said. In terms of that entertainment factor, surely sport has changed, and the attention time of the fan has drastically reduced. That's why T20 is now in the hunt. Now it's the most popular format, if you could say so. And franchise cricket, especially, has kind of it's kind of saying what you are saying, right? You want to see your favorite stars bat. It doesn't matter who wins, who loses, right? That's how it is.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yogesh.
Ricardo, you said that, back in the time, you didn't quite understand the impact that you were having. I just wanted to, you look supremely fit. Have you tried your skills recently and seen, how far you can go?
I mean, you know what? A lot of people say, yeah, you're looking fit and stuff like that. But really, actually, the game itself has changed. The level of fitness that you need to compete at the highest level on a continuous basis, it requires a certain level of fitness, which I'm 42 right now. And it will take a lot to really get back there to perform consistently, not to perform, but to perform consistently. And a lot of people and fans and stuff like that, they will say the same thing, like, hey, you're fit enough, you can get back and do it. But really, how long can you do it for? I still play a bit of T20 cricket in terms of like privately. I was recently in India in March of last year for the World Series. And those kind of short series, I think I can take on. Even those are challenging because the pace of the game has changed so much where you have to keep up. And if you can't, well, I mean, you're gonna get left behind. Sometimes I try not to revamp what I did many years ago and to come back and do it now, because sometimes people forget that that era has passed and you have way more excited players now playing in terms of, from a T20 point of view and from an excitement point of view. So I mean, I really appreciate the confidence that I could come back and play, but really and truly, like, how long could you really play for?
So slightly more seriously now, I just used a bit of a spin-off from your earlier conversation. But question I'm going to ask you really, Ricardo, is about the art of playing and art of playing spin, especially the innings that sort of brought you to that world stage, and you were tackling spinners like Nikhil Chopra, a flattish off spinner. On the other hand, you had Anil Kumble, and then you had a conventional left arm spin of Sunil Joshi. So growing up, how did you train against spin? So when we were actually seeing you play against those spinners, you look completely at home. Somebody who could have trained, for instance, on the Indian turf.
Again, when you're young, you take a lot for granted. And back then, I had no idea the impact I would have from sweeping. I really loved to sweep back then. I wasn't afraid to hit across the line of the ball. I wasn't afraid to use my feet to come down the wicket. And again, that was fearless, because if maybe I had known who Anil Kumble was in detail, who Joshi was, who Chopra was, I would probably play all those things in my head before going out to bat.
Absolutely.
That was I think that was either my fourth or fifth ODI that I was playing. So I wasn't familiar with a lot of teams and their players, because back then we had no chance to go through team roster to look at videos, see players and stuff like that. So for me, it was just a fearless game. I was young, coming into a team of a lot of great players. You had Brian Lara and those guys. So I think I was allowed to play my game. I was allowed to be free, spirited, and just play what I see when I get to the crease. And that's pretty much what I did when I played against India in Singapore. I was fearless. The ball was there. I wasn't afraid to play my shot. I would take chances. I would step down the wicket. And Singapore wicket at the time was no different from Indian wickets. The wicket was spinning this much. But as I said, I think I had the skills to do it then, and I wasn't afraid to do it.
Mm.
Interesting.
That's
I
it.
think people keep talking about Singapore a lot, Ricardo, but I think there's one more innings which you nearly broke our hearts again in Toronto. If I could make you remember that innings, I think probably Ganguly was the captain back then in that
Yeah.
specific series, and you literally
Chris
took the
Gayle
game
debuted in
away
that
from
series.
us. Sorry.
Chris Gayle debuted
Yeah,
in that
Gayle
series.
debuted in that series. Yeah, and I think that was the final game, and it just took one blinder of a catch from Robin Singh to kind of end your inning. But otherwise, you were on course to do another Singapore to us.
Yeah, I mean, that was a very exciting series. A little different in terms of playing international in Canada.
Yeah.
Back then, the grounds were a little bit smaller as well.
Yeah.
But not taking away from what I did in terms of the size of the ground, because those sixes were pretty much going.
It doesn't matter with you.
Right. But yeah, I mean, it was always a very exciting time for me playing against India. I think it's something that started off on a very good track in the sense that I started off performing against India. So my confidence grew whenever I play against India. The same thing would have applied to Bangladesh, maybe Zimbabwe, Australia to a certain extent. So I think there's certain elements that applies to any player whenever you go to play against a team that you do well against.
Right.
That confidence is up here, because sometimes it doesn't matter your talent, it doesn't matter how good you are as a player. If your confidence is down here and your talent is up here, you're not going to perform. It's always better if you have a high confidence and your confidence or your talent is very limited. Confidence is everything when it comes to international cricket, and that is something that I had and probably still have up to this day in terms of when I walk out to bat. My confidence is always above what the situation is, and I feel that I can always take on whatever the ball and whatever the situation. Sometimes you perform, sometimes you fail, but it's just the ratio of cricket in terms of batting. It's normally 60-40. And playing against India, I think at that time started off on the right foot, and to this day, that was probably the best thing that I did for my career. That 100 started off at the top, and then God's willing, I was able to continue along that path.
Awesome. Mahesh?
Ricardo, you played your last ODI at the age of 27. Right? How come you were not able to come back to the West Indies team? Was there an injury? What was the reason?
I mean, there were a lot of reasons back then. At the time, West Indies cricket, I wouldn't say it was as organized or as well run as it is today. And even today, they still have their issues. A lot of people would look at you and say you're crazy to walk away from the game at age 26 plus. But there was never any guarantees when you play for West Indies. You went to a tour this month, and whether you perform or you fail and you come back, you wasn't sure if you're going to be on the next tour going forward. And I was a little bit frustrated and at times overwhelmed by situation where you're not able to plan your life in terms of what do you do after a 2-month tour and you come back home, whether you perform or you fail. You wait on a board to call you or to send a message to the selector to say, okay, you're being selected to leave next week to go on a tour. And for somebody back then who had a life, I mean, I was married and I had my first son then. I wanted to have a secure future. I want to make sure that I could plan along with my wife. And that is something that was very hard to do. It was a roller coaster with West Indies cricket. You're not sure if you're going or you're coming. And I actually decided to take a break after that last Sri Lanka ODI and just to step back and to start planning life ahead just for our future and stuff like that. And I think it was the following year after the World Cup in the Caribbean, I was deciding to really come back and maybe to start playing some cricket. Unfortunately, in 2008, My wife was diagnosed with breast cancer, so I had to also pull back then. And but West Indies cricket really didn't make it any better in terms of that concrete job like what it is now. You know that cricket is your full-time work and that's what you do. You don't have to worry about anything. You're on a contract. You're taken care of. You don't have to worry about, okay, I'm going on a tour next month. What do I do when I get back after the tour? Am I going to be selected? Is the selected going to favor me or not? So a lot of these things played a big role in terms of me walking away. And there was a constant fighting between the Players Association and the board. So you know that nothing was ever resolved at any stage. So it was a very I wouldn't even use the word hostile, but it was a very uncomfortable situation to be in as a player. You could never focus on the game and do well continuously. So at that stage, I felt that it was best to just move away from the game and focus on life outside of cricket.
Interesting. Mahesh, Nishad.
Yes, my question is, can you tell us a little bit about Jamaican cricket and its culture? Growing up, you would have been to the Sabina Park a few times, watched Test matches, Michael Holding running in till 1987. Then, of course, the West Indies cricket culture itself, in terms of how strong it was and the way it was a fortress until 1995. Different players coming through the ranks, and then later Jamaica went on to build a strong team itself. Chris Gale was around, you were around, Wavell Hines, I think Laurie Williams, and some of the others were around. So, can you tell us a little bit about cricket in Jamaica and how it influenced you as a player?
Well, I mean, it was always an honor and a privilege to back then to even listen to these players on the radio, because I grew up in the country. I grew up like 112 miles outside of Kingston, which is outside of Sabina Park. So as a young player growing up, I never had the opportunity to even go to Sabina Park to watch a game. I started out at high school, and I mean, whenever Jamaica would play, you would listen to the games on the radio. I have to this day give a lot of respect to guys like Tony Kozia, and all those commentators who back then literally, Reds Pereira, who described the game literally as if you were there watching the game. Every ball that was bowled, if you had a dog or a pigeon that fly across the ground, you would know exactly what was happening at the ground. So they would describe the game as if you were there, and that gave us the fight and the energy and the enthusiasm to want to play for Jamaica, even though it was a far-fetched dream at the time, because you were young. You had guys as said Jimmy, Courtney Walsh, Franklin Rose, Larry Williams, and all these guys before us in terms of Chris Gale, myself, Marlon Samuels. So I remember in 1997, maybe 1996 was my first time really stepping on Sabina Park wicket, and that was to represent Jamaica under 19. So really the first time I got to be inside the stadium was actually representing Jamaica. I went to Sabina Park once before to watch a game, and that was in the stands. I couldn't even go on the ground. So for me, in terms of to be able to experience that and to play for Jamaica at the time, I was like, I think 18, making my debut with Courtney Walsh. And I remember the debut was against Barbados, and that particular game was the game after the England West Indies was cancelled. I don't know if you guys
remember. The pitch. Yeah, correct.
Dangerous. They cannot play on it. And a couple of days after, we went and played Barbados with guys like Patterson Thompson was bowling 100 miles an hour.
Wow.
And as a young 18-year-old making their debut against Barbados, I mean, I couldn't imagine like the kind of nerves I had going out on a wicket like that, where a test match was just cancelled because it was considered dangerous. So there were a lot of elements in terms of going out, playing with those guys at the time, walking and being in a dressing room with them. It was like unreal. You feel like it was, literally on cloud nine. So all of those elements contributed to us and the drive and the will to do well and to want to be a part of that legacy.
Interesting. I
Beautiful.
mean, love the way you brought in that element of the Jamaica Test match getting cancelled, and and you having to play on the same track. That was amazing, right?
Yeah.
Have you ever modeled your game? I mean, I'm sure a lot of people. You spoke about a lot of legends that you played with, but have you ever modeled your game on the great Sir Viv Richards? Because I'm sure a lot of people would have started drawing those comparisons when they saw you.
Well, a lot of the comparison were made, but you know what's strange enough for us back then in the Caribbean, we didn't even have a chance to see Viv. We didn't have a chance to see Sir Gary or Clive Lloyd play. Now we didn't even have like tapes to watch these guys play. So for us back then to really emulate or want to be like that particular player was difficult because you only hear about them. As I said, luckily we had commentators who were able to describe these players when they played, but you never really see these guys. I only started seeing tapes of Viv and Lloyd and Sobers when I started playing internationally and I started traveling, and you got the opportunity to now afford to buy a DVD or whatever, or when you go overseas you can ask one of the cameramen from the network, can we see some videos of, we just didn't have anything, and you could only imagine like what these guys were like based on the description from commentators. So when I was playing for the West Indies and people start saying, hey, you play just like Viv, and I'm like, I have to say respectfully, or I appreciate it, but I had no idea in terms of the way these guys played. I just know he was attacking. He would hit the ball out the ground at a given notice and stuff like that. So I really appreciate it. And at no stage I ever made any comparison to someone like Viv, because it's very hard to even fit into a section of that shoe. So you don't want to take any kind of credit or anything like that. You want to leave great where it is, and you on your little road trying to make a name for yourself.
Oh,
brilliant, awesome. Yogi.
So I'll Ricardo, I mean, West Indies obviously has a rich tradition of rich cricketing talent, and you know how phenomenal an opportunity is when you actually get to represent your country. I'm sure, Ricardo, in your time, you've seen players who couldn't quite make to the national team, and we didn't have the privilege to see them. Were there some players that you remember who you feel were so talented that it would have been a joy for people to actually see them play?
I mean, when it comes back then to Test cricket, I mean, I remember playing with a young player by the name of Liam Garrick. He opened back then with Chris Gale. I think he had just the opportunity to play one or two Test match.
One Test match.
One Test match. His first Test match at Sabina Park. The first ball was bowled. I remember it like it was yesterday. It was Alan Donald bowling outside the off some short of a length, and he cut the ball straight to point. And the stadium just went whoop, like you could hear a pin drop, because everybody was expecting this young man to really go on and do great things, because in first class cricket, he was the dominant opener ahead of Chris Gale. When he goes to bat against all the greats in terms of West Indies bowling attack, from Barbados to Leeward Islands, where you have Sir Courtney Ambrose and all these guys, he would always dominate. But again, it comes back to the inconsistency of West Indies cricket in terms of, as a player, you just never know. And that's his first and last Test, but he had the ability to be one of the great West Indian openers. But after that, he just didn't get the opportunity again.
Sad.
It is great that you bring out this story, because I read this in Chris Gale's book, and he's described it exactly the same way, because he says he knows how good Leon Garrick was, and they walked out to open the batting, and apparently they were also quite close. And for Gale himself, it was a moment. It was a great moment seeing his friend opening the batting with him, and Gale is at the other end, and he sees him cut his first ball off two jaunty roads of all people. So it's just about margins, a little bit here, a little bit there. And this brings me also to, I'm sorry, this is a story from when India toured West Indies in 1971. Sunil Gavaskar was injured for the first Test, and there was another opener by the name of K. Jayantilal, who was picked for that Test match. And he was set to be one of the next big things in Indian cricket. And unfortunately, when he scored 5, he edged one, and Gary Sobers took a great catch. That happened at Sabina Park. The next test match, Sunil Gavaskar opens the batting, Jayanti Lal is dropped. When again Gavaskar is on the similar score, edges to Gary Sobers, who has a regulation catch at first slip, and Sobers drops it. And we all know what Sunil Gavaskar went on to do.
Yeah, I think, I mean, for me, like, and again, when you're that young, you don't really understand a lot of these things in terms of cricket and life. And this is something that I got to appreciate later in life, because sometimes God have a favor over your life where you're able to get from point A to point B, and not everybody gets that opportunity
Right.
to continue. And that question regarding those players, a lot of times I look back and I'm like, how this player didn't make it? Why they didn't make it? I mean, they were so good. They had tremendous talent, but not everybody get the opportunities. And sometimes when you get that opportunity, cricket is like that. You have to. It's almost like you have to grab it and run, because somebody is literally right behind you, or even right beside you at the opposite end.
Yeah.
They're looking to get that opportunity, and sometimes some people get it, and sometimes some people don't.
Mm.
Absolutely agree.
So,
All right. So sorry, go ahead, Rupesh.
yeah, just moving slightly on a different track now. Ricardo, you have experience of being a selector, working very closely with US cricket. And can you talk to us a bit about what the scene in the country is on the cricketing side of things, and how are they progressing, etc.
Well, I mean, I was the chairman for about 4 years. I ended my stint the end of 2019 into early 2020. There are a lot of changes that is currently happening with USA cricket. For the betterment, I must say. COVID has really pushed things back a little bit, and they had quite a few setbacks, even at the point of trying to qualify for the T20 World Cup, where there were a lot of changes to get things fixed quickly, which was not in the best benefit of the team. At the time, I was still a selector, and those things pushed the cricket back somewhat. I mean, in the 4 years that I was there with the coach Pugadu Desaki from Sri Lanka and a couple guys from the ICC, cricket was on a very steady track to go. We got ODI status, things was going really well. But I think we got a little bit too ambitious too quickly in terms of wanting to change things and hoping that those things would be an immediate success, where we're going to get associate players become international overnight. And those things, it doesn't matter the coach or the people who you get to come and change things, is not going to happen overnight. Associate nations operate differently from international teams and stuff like that, and you have to have people who have experience of dealing with associate nation. And someone like Kubudu Desaki, who was the coach, he had worked with Canada, Nepal, and he got them to the World Cup. And this was somebody I felt at the time who was en route to getting USA cricket to a stage where it could be recognized as an international body.
Right.
And unfortunately, his departure kind of set things back a bit, because there were a little bit of things that weren't happening the way he wanted. And I was pretty much on board with him in terms of having those things done to make sure that we could continue the success of the squad that we had. And I mean, I am assuming, I mean, nothing has really happened since then in terms of cricket wise, but I'm hoping and I'm very optimistic that with the current crop of players that we still have in the country, and the current influx of players overseas who wish to play for the USA now, that things can really get back on track. And the ODI status that they have, they can continue on that path. They can become um, qualified for the T20 World Cup, and potentially with the minor league that is supposed to start this coming year, that can be a good first class level to really build talent. And then with the major league in 2022, that will put USA on the map, where cricket is now being recognized as any other country. Because
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of people don't know that cricket in the US in terms of the amount of cricket that is played here is much larger than the UK, the West Indies, maybe even Sri Lanka and a couple of these places. Overall, we have an active, I think, 228 active clubs or something like that playing cricket. Over
Wow.
a million players.
Quite a bit.
So there are a lot of cricket that is played in terms of the domestic level. It's just that we need structure in terms of to be able to have a good competitive level where you can select the best players in the country from.
Nice.
Interesting. I mean, I for sure am looking forward to the minor league this year and the major league next year as well, because all I've been hearing in the last few years and positively is about USA cricket, making up the ranks and really coming up, and hopefully even 2028 Olympics, where we could see cricket being an Olympic sport in LA. Yeah, so
That would be something else, and I think
yeah,
it's
yeah,
within the frame of happening. I think once
yeah,
the investors can put in the right infrastructure,
yeah.
I think it's something that can happen.
Mm.
I think we've lost Venu, have we?
Yeah, I think he's frozen. He's frozen there. So
I think we just had Venu, who's just gotten locked out. But
okay.
but again, that brings me to another question. You were picked. Actually, this is what I wanted to ask you. You were picked for the '99 World Cup, which was, I think, Carl Hooper pulled out, and you were brought in.
Yeah.
Young guy going to a World Cup with these guys, and you made your debut against Pakistan, I think, with Wasim, Waqar, and all those guys around. Can you tell us a little bit about playing fast bowlers, especially having played the likes of Walsh and Ambrose in the nets?
Well, I mean, wow. I don't think anything really can or could have prepared me for the opening of a World Cup game, making my debut as a young
Mm.
19-year-old. That was something that was almost unreal. I mean, I was blessed enough that Carl Hooper withdraw from that World Cup, and I was the replacement. Thanks to Sir Garfield Sobers, who recommend me after making 100 against Barbados in Barbados against a West Indies fast bowling attack at the time. But I mean, I was not even carded to play that first ODI. I got into that team because the previous 2 days we played a warm up game against I think Surrey at the Oval, and I made 48 runs from something like 18 or 16 balls.
Oh,
And then they're like, okay, this youngster is ready. He is very entertaining. He can really make his debut here. But I mean, which young player at that time want to make the debut against Wazim Akram, Shoaib Akhtar, Saklik Mushtaq, Razak,
yeah.
Mohammed? I mean, it was a nerve-wracking, pretty much experience, especially with someone like Shoaib at the time who was bowling
Yeah.
pretty quick.
Seriously.
Yeah, I mean, making your debut against a team like that, it was
Yeah.
always going to be challenging. But I was open for the challenge, and I mean, it didn't come off as the way I planned. But that experience, I mean, whether you fail or perform, you can't really describe those experience or even take it the wrong way, because it's an experience and something like that you'll never be able to get again. So I mean, I truly am appreciative of that opportunity, and it's something that I hold dear to my heart up to this day.
Mm.
Mahesh
Ricardo, another
and
thing.
Yogesh.
Yeah. So, Ricardo, I have a question. There is a lot of fierce competition in the domestic circuit in the West Indies. I mean, between the islands, like Jamaica versus Barbados. I mean, we keep reading about it in the early 80s. Is there fierce competition even there today also?
I think the competition is still there, because one thing about West Indies cricket is that they have tremendous amount of talent.
Yeah.
In terms of the competitiveness of the cricket overall, in terms of the first class level, I can't say it's the same. I think the wickets have deteriorated. Fast bowlers cannot get what they used to get out of the wickets. Spinners are doing a lot more in terms of the balls are turning a whole lot more than it's used to. So you find the competitiveness is still there, but the quality of cricket is not as high as it used to be. And hence our our performance at the next level in terms of the inconsistency, in terms of playing against the top teams in their country. For instance, the West Indies team that just played in New Zealand. We don't have wickets like those in the Caribbean anymore.
Yeah.
So for us to adapt immediately when we go on tour to play against a team like New Zealand in those conditions, we're going to struggle for the first couple of games. And it's not like back then where you have 5 tests where you can recover after 2. By the time you play a 2-test match, the series is over. So there are a lot of things to be done in the West Indies that needs the team to get back at the competitive level. We're always going to be good at the shorter version of the game because talent plays a big role in T20 cricket. You have to be skilled. You have to have that natural flair, whether it be in fielding, bowling, and batting. So we have that. But in terms of the longevity, the consistency, to play and to be patient, that is something that we don't have. I wouldn't say we have that anymore. I don't think we have the players with the capabilities of making that adjustment quickly when we go overseas to really adapt to their conditions.
So on the same lines, I'll ask you a question, Ricardo. Then take us into the island. Talk to us about the island life and what makes you guys so phenomenally talented and athletic in a sense. And it's not just limited to cricket. That most of the sports that is played. That you guys are talented, but what makes it so?
Well, I mean, I think in terms of the Caribbean in general, I think genes is a hell of a thing when it comes to our natural ability. I think we grew up no differently from you guys when you grew up in India. We grew up in some of us in the country, some of us in the city, but we play our cricket and all sports. We started off in the backyard, on the streets. So our natural flair in terms of running, jumping over a big stone, running around the corner of something and picking up a ball a certain way, running from our parents who want to catch us either to beat us. I think there are always different elements to our natural ability in terms of growing up. We go to school, we are free, we go outside, we play, we climb trees. We do so many different natural things that enhance our ability. When you look at a lot of the other international teams, most of their crickets they're learned indoors. They have to go to a particular coach at a young age to start playing cricket. So the natural flair, we don't know anything about indoors in the Caribbean really. I mean, everything is played outdoors. We have our districts and communities where as a youngster we're gonna go and play against that community, and we create our own scenarios to do things. Athletics is the same way. We have our friends and we race them. Soccer, we grew up, we're playing on the streets. So our natural ability comes from those things. But I think for the continuation of such things to happen, there must be something in your genes. And that is something that I think West Indians have, that natural flair and ability that continues to grow with the islands.
Brilliant. Thanks so much.
Brilliant. Great, guys. I think maybe we could just end off with one audience question, Ricardo, and then we should be done. We have one from Siddharth. So what's the one thing that you really focused on while growing as a cricketer, if there's any specific thing that you focused on?
Well, in terms of, what would I say in terms of as a cricketer growing up focusing on? I always saw that, I mean, at the end of the day, I was never in charge. I was never in control of my future. I was always a very spiritual person in the sense that I didn't get myself there in the first place. So at any time in your life going forward, this can be taken away from you. So I always treat each game, each tour as if it was my last. I always play to the fullest. I always tried to play to win. It was never about my personal career to make runs. And in the end, sometimes it really backfired on me because I would sacrifice myself to get the team to win. I would try to make 40 runs from 10 balls if we're in situation batting down the lower order and stuff like that. And not every time it happened for me. So, but I think with doing that, I was still able to build a name for myself and a reputation that to this day still is recognized for the things that I used to do. And that is a clear example of sometimes you might think that you're doing something against yourself, but in hindsight, is actually for your betterment going forward. So I try not to live life in regret and to say why I did X, Y, and Z, because the future is always better than what's behind.
Well said.
Well
Very
said,
Very
well
man.
well.
said.
Absolutely. Great, Ricardo. I think, that's pretty much about what we wanted to ask you. And we wanted to thank you a lot because, this was really, really a great session. And, got to live your cricketing career through this discussion and, understand so many aspects about the game and, so many beautiful stories that you brought out, which obviously the general public will not have access to or would not have heard somewhere else. So thanks a lot. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you guys for having me. It was a pleasure.
All right.
Thanks a lot.
So
God bless.
cool.
Thanks a lot.
Looking forward to the next test at Sydney, and we'll be back next week, guys. Take care, Ricardo. Take care, guys. Bye bye.
Good luck, India.
Bye.
Cheers.
God bless. Thanks. Bye.